Everybody, Rich with Prep U, hanging out at the desk this morning. Today's video, we're going to talk about safe and secure petroleum storage. It's a lot of thing. It's something I should say that a lot of people don't think of. They just go to the gas station, fill up their lawnmower, do whatever. But you have to think about all the safety precautions that go along with it. And we've got kind of a long video. We're going to do some explaining about uh, flammable liquids and stuff like that. Obviously, coming from a fire department background, having safe flammable storage and response to flammable storage, fires or vehicle fires and stuff like that, was a top priority, safety issue for all of us. But I want to talk about some of the things you may not think about and the different ways to store fuel that people in the rural communities, it's like, yeah, it's no big deal. That's how we do it. It's just, and people in construction and how they do it. And totally different from, people in the city or suburban areas and how they store fuel. But I could keep going on like this for a while, but I'm not going to. So let's get right into it. A lot of people wonder, why major storage of fuel? There's all kinds of different reasons. Obviously, you're going to store fuel if you have a yard for a lawnmower, unless you've got a new electric lawnmower, which are pretty cool. My son's got one. He likes it. Also depends on your yard. They're getting better and better, but for fuel storage for that, I mean, then there's different types of fuel you're going to store. You could store kerosene. You could store, obviously, gasoline or diesel or whatever. But why do you keep a supply on hand? Well, for shortages. If you're as old as I am, you remember the oil embargo back in the 70s, which was BS. Extra fuel for generators. If you live in an area where you are prone to power outages, and you have a generator, you want to make sure you have enough fuel on hand above and beyond. We've had it in our area here, and we're basically far suburbs of Chicago, where we were out of electricity for a week, 10 days. And to keep your generators going, if you don't have the means to get the fuel out of the ground, you better have enough fuel storage around. I know we were sharing it here on the block. People were going quite a distance away to get fuel and bring it back and stuff like that. Inability to get fuel, power outage, heavy snow, bad weather, tornadoes, or whatever. That could be a big thing. You might want to keep a lot on hand because of high use. Let's think of farming or trucking, mining operations, construction, road building. They all carry or keep a lot of, or carry and keep a lot of fuel on hand, be it gasoline and diesel, and everyday use, just use around the house. You might want to have a 5-gallon can with a couple 1-gallon cans and stuff like that. What are some of the supplies you're going to need when you think about the different fuel uses? Storage vessels, obviously, they should be approved. You're not going to put them in a glass container or anything. You should also have either electric, intrinsically electric, or hand-operated transfer pumps and hoses. Okay, and that goes for gases, liquid or like gasoline, diesel, as well as gas like LP, stuff like that. They actually sell transfer where you can get a large, let's say a canister for your um, grill or your patio heater, and you can actually have a device that will fill the small, I call them the Coleman canisters. Once those are out, I have a grill that starts the charcoal with a small canister of gas, and then I turn that off, and then the charcoal lights. I love it. It's very nice. You also want to have like safety goggles and glasses on hand. You should be using them because you don't want fuel splashing in your face at all. Spill and fire mitigation equipment. We'll talk about that. You got to have some of that stuff around. And you want to have some kind of a plan for use, mitigation, and training. Um, you don't just tell your kid that's however old has never done it before, hey, go fill up the lawnmower, I'll be right out. You just don't want to do that. You want to train them just like you would train them how to use anything, which is very, very important. Um, Ways to store. There's all different kinds of ways to store your fuel. Individual cans, half-gallon cans, all the way up to 5-gallon cans, 55-gallon drums, above ground gravity tanks, below ground tanks, fuel trucks, fuel transfer trucks on vehicles. You've seen those, a lot of them. They've got a tank in the back. A lot of times it's diesel and it's got a hand crank. Sometimes, other times it's electric. And obviously pressurized vehicles for LP, gas, and on and on. So safe storage. When we talk about safe storage, we want to talk about in approved flammable liquid containers. And then when you store it, they should be inside approved flammable liquid cabinets. If you've never seen them, if you've ever been into a business that has those big yellow heavy duty cabinets, it says flammable liquids on them. Obviously there's flammable liquids in there. As a fire inspector for years, we would always make sure that companies would store their flammable liquids inside the flammables cabinets, and then properly store and dispose of any oily rags or rags that have flammable liquids on it in a metal container that has a top that closes. All right, so you shouldn't keep rags like that around anyhow. Went through many fires that painters didn't realize that there was a proper way of getting rid of oily rags. So in above ground tanks, the gravity tanks, you see those a lot on farms. On some work sites, you'll see the above ground gravity tanks. You want to keep those away from buildings, livestock, and crops. You also want to keep them away from any open flame sources. All right. Store it outside of direct sunlight and 50 feet from ignition sources. And the reason for that is if you do have some off-gassing from the canisters, is they dissipate, they get out of the explosive range, and we'll talk about explosive range in a second. You want to make sure your fire suppression equipment is accessible, okay? And you want that stuff close enough, but not too close. And you also want to have it in a position that if you have a problem and you get to it, you can turn around and you say, oh crap, there's nothing I can do. You can escape. Okay, you don't want it in a place like in a corner or whatever like that you can't get out of there. You want to make sure that you have posted no smoking or open flame signs. And containers should be marked as to what's inside. Now, you can always write on them, but the international coding system for containers is gasoline is red, diesel is yellow, kerosene blue, and other oils are green. And that's just the easiest way of doing it, but you can still always write on there what it is. Let's see. And train all who will make the transfers. No unauthorized people should be transferring fuel if they don't know how to do it, because there's nuances to any way you're going to do it, either to a container or to a vehicle or whatever tank in that aspect. Fuel needs consideration. So when you're thinking about how much fuel you want to keep on hand, depending on where you live, you want to think about this. Amount needed daily is really kind of important to know how much you need, how amount needed between deliveries, because some places you might not be able to get daily or bi-weekly or weekly deliveries. It's just too prohibitive as far as a delivery cost. It's better to get a larger amount once a week than smaller amounts twice a week, because then you have a delivery fee. Amount needed for emergencies. If you can't get fuel, how much do you need on hand to keep operations going? Okay, so it doesn't shut you down. Space needed for required storage. Where are you going to store this stuff? Do you have above ground tanks? You're going to have multiple above ground tanks. How many, cans are you going to keep around, which we'll get to in a second, something else. Fuel turnover and life expectancy of fuel. Life expectancy of fuel, which we'll get into right now, fuel lasts about 6 months unless you right off the bat have a stabilizer added to your fuel, and it can make the fuel last anywhere from a year to 18 months. Beyond that, that's why you also want to rotate your fuel. Mark your cans and rotate that. When we talk about how much you can properly store, something else you have to think about is local ordinances. A lot of local ordinance will only allow so much fuel on property at one time. It could be 10 gallons, could be 25 gallons, all the way up to whatever, hundreds of gallons or thousands of gallons. And then the local codes will say how you have to store it and where you can store it and what you need around it as far as, mitigation equipment and stuff like that. So before you start buying a whole bunch of fuel, if you're like me, I've got about 10, 15 gallons, rotate it. When it gets close, even with the stabilizer, it goes in my car, and then I get new fuel. So safe transfers of fuel is really important. Again, we talked about it earlier about training the people that are going to transfer the fuel. But a couple other things you have to think about is you always want to perform in a well-ventilated area, away from all open flames, running vehicles, and open flame heating devices. All right, it's always best to transfer your fuel out in the open, where any fumes or spills can dissipate or are easily cleaned up. And if something happens, at least the fire's outside the building. You don't have to worry about burning your barn down or whatever. You always want to transfer from approved containers to approved containers or equipment. All right, like the tanks that are in back of some of the heavy duty pickup trucks that carry diesel or gasoline to equipment out in the fields. You always want to make sure that that's approved and it has the proper safety equipment, and you have the proper safety equipment to mitigate any incidences that might happen. You also want to be strong enough to be able to transfer that fuel. And what I'm talking about is a 5-gallon can of gasoline, transferring it, say, to a smaller can, because you really don't want to use a 5-gallon can of gasoline to transfer to your lawnmower or to your weed whacker or anything like that. It's just too heavy. So when you're transferring that 5-gallon of fuel, that's a lot of weight there. And sure, you first pick it up, it's great, but as you're standing there and it's slowly draining into the 1-gallon can or the 2-gallon can, you're going, this is getting heavier and heavier. You want to make sure that you have the ability to do this, or whoever you have doing it is strong enough to be able to do that. We never want to fill equipment that is hot. All right. That's why you should always, when you use any type of electric equipment, any type of gasoline equipment, be it a chainsaw, a lawnmower, a weed whacker, whatever, check fuel first. And when you check the fuel, check the oil levels. A lot of people always forget in their lawnmower, specifically lawnmower, to check their oil levels, and then they run it dry and they end up going to buy a new lawnmower. There's also in chainsaws, depending on how your chainsaw is set up, don't forget to check your bar oil also before you get going for the day. Do not smoke near fuel. I know that sounds like duh, but I'll tell you some stories at the end of this. And then also, I like to, because when you're filling a smaller container, the openings aren't that big. You want to make sure that you have a decent sized funnel, because as it comes out, remember, it starts spinning to go down, and you don't want it to come over the top of the funnel and spill all over the place. You want to be able to, fill it properly. So funnels are really great use, and don't use those funnels for anything else. That's exactly what they're used for. Mark them as such, and you'll be a happier camper that way. Okay, so fuel spills happen. I don't care where you're at. If you're at, the gas station, if you're in your backyard, if you're out in the field, they happen. So what you need to do is always keep an absorbent material like kitty litter, sand, or a commercial absorbent on hand equal to the absorbency of the largest container you're using. 5-gallon can or gallon can could spill over. Now, granted, the way they're set up, you're not going to lose all that because you're going to pick it up right away. But it's always good to have a little bit extra. Um, Speaking from the fire department side, most people don't do this. Most people don't have brass non-sparking tools like we had on the hazardous material truck to pick up flammable liquids, but you should pick it up with a non-sparking tool or a tool that won't cause static electricity, and put that into a metal container with a lid and dispose of properly. All right. Check local codes on how you're supposed to dispose of contaminated fuel. Then you can use baking soda to eliminate lingering odors. Sprinkle it over the spill area. Let it sit overnight and sweep that up. If you still smell it, put it down again and let it absorb whatever's left over. Same thing with soil. Make sure you pick up any contaminated soil and dispose of that properly. You also have to think of where you're filling it. A lot of people will fill it on their driveways or sometimes in their garage and stuff like that. You have to be careful of cracks and holes in your concrete or your asphalt, because that fuel could go down in there and soak into the fuel, into the soil down below, and produce a hazard for quite a while. So if you have a specific place that you're going to be doing your fuel transfer, you want to check the ground or the driveway or sidewalks or whatever, or parking lot, as to cracks, holes and stuff like that, and repair those beforehand, um, so it doesn't seep into the ground and cause an issue where someone didn't know that you spilled the fuel there a little while ago, and they just, and it gets in the cracks. And believe me, it can happen. It actually happened when at not our range, but at a different range. It was an older range, and there were cracks in the shooting area. And over time, you have to remember, not all of the gunpowder burns. All right, sometimes it shoots out of there because it didn't get a chance to combust, and it falls and it's slowly filled into these cracks and stuff like that. And there was a bullet that skipped off, and is what they're saying, and it went boom, and part of the ground actually, or part of the concrete actually spalled and blew all over the place. So it can happen. So if spill goes through these cracks or holes in concrete, leave the absorbent material on longer and repair the cracks and holes after the smell dissipates. Like I said, it's best to seal all that stuff ahead of time. Some other considerations that we should think about. Never use larger than a 5-gallon can to hand transfer fuel, and always use a large funnel to transfer to a smaller container. We talked about that. Inspect equipment monthly or after every use. Replace damaged or broken storage and transfer equipment immediately. And if it's broken as such that it's leaking, mark it out of service. Let somebody know that it's out of service, and they should repair it if you're not in charge of repairing stuff. Never store metal cans directly on the ground or concrete. Place on plywood to prevent condensation or rusting of the cans. You also don't want to set it up on 2x4s because there's a tipping hazard. That's why a nice piece of plywood is absolutely perfect for that. Do not fill your containers more than 95% full, because you need to leave a little room for expansion as the weather warms. You don't want to, all of a sudden have it too hot and then you open up the air vent and out comes the fuel all over you, all over the ground, all over the can. And remember, people don't think about this, but remember that an empty container is really more dangerous than a full container because of the vapor inside the can. And because you have to think about, there is a flammable range for all different kinds of flammable liquids, and we'll get into that second. Do not mix old or bad fuel with good fuel. People just think, just throw it in with the good fuel, it'll be fine, or I'll throw a little stabilizer in with it, it'll bring the octane back up. No, all you're going to do is contaminate your good fuel, and it's not going to run well in your equipment and could cause other kinds of problems. All you got to do is take it to a hazardous waste site, or check with local ordinances or local gas stations. Some gas stations will say, "Yeah, we'll take it. We'll get rid of it for you." So those are some things you can think about. Um, like fuel, like food, you need to rotate it. Don't keep a 5-gallon can in the back, of your other 5-gallon cans, and not rotate it. When you use one, you fill it up, it goes to the back. That way, you've got the stabilizer in the fuel. You're not going to have all of a sudden that fuel sitting in there for like 2 years, and then you go to use it and you wonder, why isn't my chainsaw working, or whatever. Especially with chainsaws, it's a specialty piece of equipment. You actually want to use chain chainsaw fuel. Sorry, words are hard sometimes. That's what my daughter tells me. Um, and then you may hear comments like, "Oh, is that a Type 1 or is it a Type 2 container?" Well, very easy to remember what a Type 1 container is. It's got one hole. It's got a fill hole, and the same hole is used for dispersing the fuel. All right, that's pretty easy. A Type 2, two openings, one for filling, one for dispensing. Very easy, no big deal. And when you want to talk about diesel grades, there's multiple grades. You have grade 1, grade 2, which are most common. That's what you're going to get at a fuel station. 4 is for trains. And then you have DMA or DMX, which is marine diesel. Jet fuel has multiple grades, okay? And basically, jet fuel is no different than kerosene, really, okay? Um, but you have JP1 through JP10, that's military, and then you have A and Jet A1, which is civilian. Okay. Um, then weight of fuel. When we go back to lifting the can and filling it and stuff like that, you have to think about the weight of fuel. Diesel weighs anywhere from 6.8 to 7.9 pounds per gallon. Gasoline's about 6 pounds. Kerosene and jet fuel are 6.7 pounds. Okay, so everybody always wonders, this time of year we're getting spring, and pretty soon in some states you're going to get your summer blend, and it's going to be start costing you more. Well, why does it cost you more? Why do they go to a summer blend? The reason that it costs more is it's more refined. All right, what they do to make a summer blend, they remove the butane, and then they add ethanol. And the reason being is because of off gassing in the warmer weather. You get more vapor that comes off the fuel, and by going to ethanol, it doesn't release as much vapor as butane does. So that's basically what it is. It's basically a Reid vapor pressure, and it is reduced to control evaporation. So REID, vapor pressure, is fancy term for all kinds of stuff. When we talk about how volatile different fuels are, you have to remember gasoline has a flash point of minus 45 degrees. Yeah, minus 45 degrees, you can get a flash. The flame won't stay going, but you can get a flash. Their flammable range is 1.4% to 7.6%. And what does that mean for those of you that aren't hazmat techs and stuff like that, or chemists? What that means is when you look at the total amount of air, you can have less than 1.4% atmosphere of gasoline fumes in the air, nothing's going to happen. But you hit that 1.4% all the way up to 7.6%, that is basically the explosive limits of it, upper and lower explosive limits. And what that means is it can catch fire. Above 7.6%, there's too much in there. It's too rich. You won't have an issue. You won't have an explosion or anything like that. But just remember that at some point you're going to come back down in that explosive range, and you're in a position where you could have a really big problem. All right. Auto ignition of fuel is basically when that fuel gets to 536 degrees. happens if it pours on a hot engine or whatever, it just catches fire and it just continues burning. It's not a flash and out. It continues burning. Diesel fuel, the flash point runs between 100 and 180 because of the different grades of diesel. Flammable range is 0.6% to 7.5%. And then its auto ignition temperature based on if it's 1, 2, 4, or whatever, anywhere from 350 to 544 degrees for auto ignition. So you can see it doesn't take much for diesel fuel to get going. It's not an explosion, but it is a fire, and it's a little less dangerous than gasoline, just because of the additives they put in diesel fuel. A lot of this stuff, when you go, okay, like kerosene, you have a flash point of 115 degrees. We can go on and on and on with this stuff. And one thing you have to remember about jet fuel, or as compared to, so you have kerosene, and then they put additives in the kerosene to make it so it's harder to ignite, which really sounds crazy that it's harder. The jet fuel is the hardest to ignite, but they have the additives in jet fuel for that. And don't forget, a lot of these temperatures numbers here, they can change based on the temperature of the day, the pressure, and then the quantity of the fuels, and elevation. Elevation makes a big difference. That's why fuel at elevation is a different blend than it is down along sea level. You have to remember about that. So some other considerations, final considerations that I want to talk about. A lot of these are going to be like no duh, Rich. But you have to remember no smoking or open flames around when you're dispensing fuel. Only into approved containers or approved vehicles. When you're filling containers, 1 gallon, half gallon, 5 gallons, do not fill them when they're in your trunk or the bed of your truck. Put them on the ground. It avoids static electricity and any problem that could happen. Plus, you won't overfill into the trunk of your car or the bed of your truck. You won't spill, because once you get done filling it, you're going to put the caps on tight and then put them into your vehicles. Many reasons not to fill them in your trunk. If you have problems, if you can't lift the cans for your boat or for whatever that you're filling, have somebody else come along, or ask somebody at the gas station, hey, can you give me a hand? Or don't put as much fuel in it that you need to, because it will be too heavy. This one, I'm not sure about it, if it's really true or not, but I was always told by people that always turn your vehicle off, number one, for an ignition source, but also because of the computer. If you leave your car running and then you open up your fuel, it senses a loose fuel cap, which could be an issue, and it may not reset properly. But either way, you should shut off your vehicle before filling your vehicle. It's just the way it is. Also, do not put the nozzle into your fill tube, set it, let it go, and then walk into your car. I know it's cold outside. I know it can be hot outside. I know you don't like the smell of fuel or whatever like that, but you need to stand close, not right next to it, because if it kicks off, it could splash a little bit, although they do have that nice little rubber ring on there that's supposed to hold the fuel from splashing back on you. And it works sometimes, and some stations don't even have that. They've just kind of worn off and they haven't put them back. But the nozzle could fall out and not click off, or it could keep filling and be spilling all over your car, so you need to be there to shut it off. Okay. Also, when you pull up to a gas station, maybe a lot of you have your favorite gas station. You always go to the same one. Maybe not so much when you're on vacation. Know where the emergency fuel shutoff is. So if something happens by your car, somebody else's car, you can run over the building. It's a shutoff. It's it looks like an electrical box, and it's got a quarter turn. Just shut it off, and it shuts down all the pumps, so all the fuel stops flowing. Pay attention. Stay off your phone. This is a dangerous time, even though we do it multiple times a week. Hopefully not multiple times a week, multiple times a month to fill it up. And it's just like, I've been doing this for years and nothing's happened. You're right, nothing's happened, but there's always a first time for everything. I mean, how many times I've seen cars pull away from the pump with the hose still in their car? Many times. Um, Again, fill your container 95% full and remember the weight issue. Also, when you're filling your car up, unless you know that your tank kicks off the fuel or stops the fuel flow early, don't keep clicking. Don't fill that all the way up, because all you're going to do is start splashing gas all over you, your car, and the ground and stuff like that, and cause an issue. Um, and I know there's a bunch of other stuff that you all can probably think of about, well, considerations about when you're dispensing fuel and filling up and stuff like that. But that's about all I can remember right now. The last thing I want to talk to you about is, as far as filling, is nothing to do with the fuel, has nothing to do with overfilling, nothing to do with safety precautions other than your safety. When you're at the gas station, pay attention to your surroundings. Don't be on your phone looking down, not paying any attention. Don't be, wandering around. Be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of other people around you. Okay? It is a perfect time to be carjacked, a perfect time to be robbed, perfect time for anything to happen to you because you're not paying attention to your surroundings. So please pay attention to your surroundings. So, all right, final words. Final words here. I know somewhat of what we've discussed are just no-brainers, okay? Uh, but over my 35 years of service with the fire department, multiple fire departments, I've seen a lot of very interesting things. Um, we had a fire uh, years ago that a gentleman decided to clean his motorcycle with gasoline in the basement next to the water heater. Yes, we were called, and no, we didn't save the house. He didn't blow up. He did have second-degree burns, but he didn't blow up. Uh, we've also had several times people cleaning parts with gasoline, forgetting that they just cleaned parts with their hands without any gloves on and decided to light a cigarette without cleaning their hands off. If you've ever seen somebody have their skin degloved off their hands, it'll stick with you forever. A lot of people do. We have a lot of, different gas stations and, places that repair cars and stuff like that. And we've had several times where people have not realized that the fuel tanks are dangerous because there's still fumes inside it, and have taken and cut the tanks off of cars using a torch instead of properly taking the tank off because it was, say, it was rusted, and they burned to the ground. And people have been injured. Seriously. And there's many other events that I can remember over the years that have happened because of fuel and the improper storage, improper dispensing of it. Too many to go into right now. So all I can tell you is be careful. If you are teaching your kids how to mow the lawn or use a chainsaw or whatever, also teach them proper use of fuel and the safe transfer thereof and what they should do in case something happens. All right? Don't just stand there and watch it burn. Get help. The best thing you do for kids is to be around close by when they're doing it. That's all I can say. And things happen. Unfortunately, they do. Be prepared for it. Have a plan. Know where your mitigation equipment is. Know where your fire suppression equipment is. Have it available, and have that suppression equipment near an exit or outside somewhere that if you realize that you can't do it and you really need the fire department, is that you can escape. You're not stuck in a corner. That's very, very important. So I know this is a longer video, a lot of really important parts. There's some things that most of you never were a farmer. I used to farm in the summer when I was in college. Never have worked with construction. You haven't worked with heavy amounts of fuel and stuff like that. Most of you have like 2 gallon, 1 gallon, 5 gallon cans, and that's it. But even a 5 gallon can, a 1 gallon can can be very, very dangerous, and burns hurt. If you've ever burnt yourself on the stove, imagine having your leg or your arm or whatever burned by fuel. It's not fun. It hurts a lot, and it's a lifelong lasting scar that you're going to have. So be very, very careful. Hey, thanks for watching. We really appreciate it. Hope you have a very fun and safe rest of the year. And subscribers, we appreciate it. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to our video and comment. And if you like it, please like it. Thanks a lot. Take care. See you next time.